Hi there, you're listening to a podcast that's created and sponsored by Second Avenue Baptist Church. If you enjoy what you hear today, check out our website and app by visiting secondavenuembc.org. You can find our mobile app and tons more content, podcasts, sermons, and more by searching for Second Avenue on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to episode 34 of Decision Point. Today is part 3 of a series on Abram, entitled this podcast, The Protection of Sarai. Today we'll be in Genesis chapter 12 and chapter 20. So as you're opening your Bible and your Bible app, here's today's trivia. How is Sarai and Abram related? Of course, later known as Sarah and Abraham. What was their relationship? Stick around to the end of the podcast for the answer to that question. And now we'll be reading from the New American Standard Version today, Genesis chapter 12, beginning at verse 10 through 20, but skipping a little bit here and some paraphrasing for time's sake. But it begins, Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a time, because the famine was severe in the land. Now, in verses 11 through 13, here is the synopsis. As they got close, Abram, realizing that his wife was a beautiful woman, said to his wife that when the Egyptians see you, they will want to kill me because you're my wife and they'll want to take you for their own. So please tell them you're my sister. That way I can live because of you. You're willing to save my life in case they want to take you from me. Well, it came to pass, verse 14, that when Abraham did enter into Egypt, or rather Abram at this time, that the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful, and Pharaoh's officials saw her, told Pharaoh all about her. And then in verse 16, Pharaoh treated Abram well for her sake. He gave him sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels, as he took her into his house. Verse 17, the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, and Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away, speaking of Abram, with his wife and all that belonged to him. Well, then we jump down to Genesis chapter 20, and we see the same scenario playing out this time as they're heading to the land of Negev, this time heading to Gerar. So Abraham said to his wife again, this is chapter 20, verse 2. Abram said to his wife again, talked to the king Abimelech of Gerar and said, She's my sister. So the king of Gerar, Abimelech, sent men and took Sarah again. This time her name's already changed to Sarah and Abraham at this time. But then that night, a dream came to Abimelech. And in that dream, God said to him, Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you've taken, for she is married. Skipping down to verse 6, God continues, saying, Yes, I know in the integrity of your heart you have done this, and I also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, know that you will certainly die, you and all who are yours. Going down to chapter 20, verse 14, Abimelech then took sheep and oxen, male and female servants, and gave them to Abraham, and returned Sarah to him. Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before you. Settle wherever you please. To Sarah he said, Look, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your vindication before all who are with you and before everyone you are clean. In verse 17, Abraham prayed to God. God healed Abimelech and his wife and his female slaves so that they gave birth to children because the Lord had closed their wombs of all the households of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So this is two distinct times in Abram and Abraham's life after his name was changed that he, in other words, kind of showed cowardice to save his own skin and ask his wife to say that he was his sister so that he may live. And now this experience is bad enough as it is because, Sarah, I always wonder what goes through Sarah's mind in this situation where she's taken as property by the Pharaoh of Egypt and the king of Gerar, Abimelech, who was, by the way, the Philistine king. We know all the problems that come up later on between the Philistines and the Israelites. But as she's taken there, what feelings does she have? What feelings do Abram have? Or does Abram have? Does Abraham think about? Are they praying? Are they fasting? What are they thinking about the promise they just received from God, the promise to their offspring that will inherit the promised land? Sometimes in those dark situations, those dark times, God uses those exact things to bring us nearer to Him. Now, this was a sin that Abraham committed. This was a sin of omission. This was a sin of him basically lying to save himself, but yet God protected Sarah. Now, Sarah went along with it. She didn't have to, but as a submissive wife, she did so. I don't know the whole conversation. All we have are bits and pieces of what happened, just the facts and only the facts. But we see that God benefited Abraham through even his, I will call it disobedience, through his lying, through his not protecting the wife that God had given him as a man to protect and love. But see, God turned those dark times into a blessing where he received even more wealth, more animals, even money, silver from the king of Gerar. God's sovereignty, his protection, his love, his blessings extend to everyone on the earth. God is in control. And from all of this, that's what I want us to take away from here, is the protection of Sarah is not a protection that's given to every person in the world. Bad things happen. Bad things are brought upon from other people's perspectives, from other people's sins, and from the sins of our lives. But God's plan and his will never be changed. His sovereignty, speaking to a man who was a polygamist, not a polygamist, but polygamist and a polytheist, rather. That's the word I was trying to think of. This king of the Philistine people, the king of Gerar, worshiped multiple gods, didn't worship the God of the Bible, but yet God spoke to him. God guarded him, Sarah, protected her from having to be with the king that night. God's hand, his sovereignty, is over all things. And even though Abraham caused this issue, Sarah allowed this issue. Even those dark times where we cause our own demise, we need to use those situations to learn what God would have for us to learn. We have to think in those times, how might God use this situation for my benefit? But most importantly, not just for me, but for his plan and his will. So no matter what we go through, whether it's self-inflicted or something completely out of our control, we have to know that God is in control and he will use these things for his plan and his perfect will. And as we end up today, the one more thing I want to say about this is I love how the Bible is so unique in that it doesn't just share the good things that happen. It doesn't just share the blessings that Abraham gets, the good things that he does. It also records the failures so that we can see God's hand moving through those times. We can see God's restoration. We can see God's protection. And I hope that gives us a little bit of hope for our lives. Well, here is today's trivia question once again. We know that Sarah and Abraham were married, but how were they related? Well, Genesis 20:12 lets us know that Abraham wasn't completely lying when he said, "She's my sister," because he says this, "Besides, she is actually my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife." So Sarah and Abraham were actually half siblings. Different times, folks. Different times. Well, I hope you guys are taking something from today in this third part of Abram. Looking forward to seeing you again next week for another Decision Point.
Thank you for listening today, and if you enjoyed what you heard, consider leaving us a 5-star rating and review. It will help us reach more people just like you who need to hear this message. Also remember that you can stay connected with us by downloading our mobile app. Just search for Second Avenue, spelled out, on the App Store or Google Play Store. Thank you again for listening, and God bless.